All right, so we are recording now, and happy, let's see, Thursday, December 8th, and welcome to the Kubernetes SIG meeting. Good local time to you. This morning we are, after our moments of technical difficulties, we are going to get started with Kubeless, a serverless framework that Sebastian Gowaskin is going to give us a demo of. So Sebastian, let's get you started.
Okay, desktop share screen. Okay, you'll tell me, Sarah, if you guys don't see my screen, okay?
We can see your screen just fine.
Okay, cool. Thanks. So good morning, everybody. Good evening if you're in Europe. I'm gonna give you a quick demo of Kubeless. I'm Sebastian from Skipbox, and I did this work with Tuna. Actually, he did most of the work. I just acted as a product owner and gave him all the requirements and tested a bunch of things. Kubeless, so it's serverless for Kubernetes. And it came out a little bit as a joke when I was at KubeCon, and I said, hey, I'm Kubeless in Seattle. If you're a moviegoer, you get the joke. And then at the meetup, Craig mentioned that he would like to see a serverless framework in Kubernetes, and that sparked my interest. And Brendan also gave a talk on compile to kube, which was very interesting. So it's a little bit of a mix of those ideas. Definitely there are alternatives out there. Fission from Platform 9, Function from Fabric 8. OpenWhisk is a project from IBM which entered the Apache incubator. So there are alternatives that we could run on Kubernetes, okay? But what we've done is a little bit of a different design. We use a third-party resource. We then have a controller running in the cluster that looks at the custom resources that are being created. And we also started using Kafka as an event stream inside the cluster. Why did we do this? Primarily, it's exploration. I'm not leaving Kubernetes, but just curious to see what we could do with serverless on Kube. And also because GCloud Functions very likely runs on board. So they most likely have an app like this that provides GCloud function. And there was a ton of craziness around Lambdas during reInvent. So we got excited. We'd done some work on something called KubeWatch, which was a controller watching all the resources inside your cluster and talking to Slack. So we had the controller in place that we could extend to do the serverless work. Okay, so let's demo. So it's on GitHub, github.com/skipbox/kubeless. You get a nice CLI. We're still working on it. You can create functions. You can install everything. You can create topics for messages and so on. So let's switch to the terminal. I'm on Minikube. So I have no pods running. If I look at my pods in all my namespaces, I see that I have a kubeless controller. I have a Kafka controller, which runs one Kafka container and Zookeeper. I also have a third-party resource that has been launched, which we call right now Lambda KLS.io. Okay. And that's it. So now if I lose Kubeless, I can use Kubeless function list, and I have no functions. So let's look at a basic function. We have one in the example folder, and we'll look at alloget.py. Currently, we only support Python, so you get a very stupid function here. So let's edit that so that you're sure that we're doing this live. Hello cube. So you write your function and then you go kubeless function create. You give it a name, demo, and then you specify what kind of trigger this is. So it's a HTTP trigger. You specify a runtime. Right now we only have one runtime. You specify a handler, which is going to be the base name of the function file, and then the actual name of the function. And then you specify the file of the function, examples hello get.py. So if I did this properly, this should work. And now what you get is Kubeless function ls. You get a function that's been created. Underneath, what you get is that it created a custom resource following our Lambda spec. So now we have our Lambdas, which is demo. If I look at the demo, the YAML file of the demo, I see that I have a spec where I specify the handler, I specify the Lambda, which is just the function, the runtime, and so on. So we use third-party resources. We actually stick all of this in config maps. Config maps. So you get the config map because we use this to actually mount the method on the pod. If I look at my pods now, I have one pod running, demo pod, using our runtime, and we can call this function. For this, right now, we actually have a proxy running. We're going to get rid of this. So you go services, and the name of the function is demo. So I'm hitting the HTTP endpoint. No, what did I do? No, demo. How did I call my function? Function. It's not working.
The fun of live demos.
Yeah. So we'll look at another one, and hopefully I'm going to figure it out. We can also create. I'm going to try to recover from this. We can parse JSON. So if you do a basic JSON, we'll return the JSON. So let's try this one again. Kubeless function create demo2. It's also HTTP trigger. Runtime. It's a Python 2.7 handler. It's going to be the best name of the file over there. Hello and handler.
Tuna, Jay Nowak are suggesting that the handler is foo in your earlier demo.
Maybe. Hello with data. Okay, so let's create that one again, that new one. Let's do function ls. So we have demo2 that's been created. And we did a little hack to actually pass the JSON with a function call here. So you can call function2 and pass some data. And then let's call cube, kudo, beam, boom. There's a few things that are a little bit hackish because we're using a proxy. So we here, when we call the function, we actually have to do a port forward, but we'll get rid of this. But you'll see that on the fly, if I do my pods, I have another pod that's been created for my demo2. Function was injected dynamically in the runtime, and then we were able to control it. So I probably did a typo in the first function that we created. But people are going to say, well, HTTP trigger, that's easy. So we added Kafka in it. So we manage Kafka a little bit. So we can actually create topics on the fly. Again, honestly, that's a little bit hackish. But so let's create a community topic. Okay, topic ls. So now we have a community topic created in our Kubeless framework. And let's look at the example for the publish subscribe system. So it's just a simple echo. And we can create this function. So, function create demo3, and now the trigger is not HTTP anymore. It's a topic trigger, kind of like the Lambda CLI. And we're going to trigger, listen to the community topic. Runtime, yeah, a little bit longish, on the side here. Name of the file. Up. from file example pub/sub. So let's try this. Okay. So here the runtime when we do the pub/sub, it's a little bit different. The way we inject it. So now we have another pod running, demo 3. And to see if this works, we can actually emit the message. So we did a little Kafka wrapper. So we can do a function publish, and we can publish on the topic that we use, which is community topic. So you publish the message on the community, and you say hello, Sarah, and let's see if this works. So you publish the message, and right now, to actually see if this works, you actually need to check the logs of the consumer, and it says hello, Sarah. Okay, so that's it. I messed up the first one, which is the basic get with HTTP. But hopefully you saw that Kubeless works. Again, it leverages third-party resources. You can create basic functions. Only Python runtime. Would love to get some help to get Java, Node, something like this. And we have the basics of using an event framework. And from just looking at this, the big issue is actually going to have now other services running that are going to emit events. You don't want to emit events by hand. So you need other things in your cluster to emit those events so that they're going to call the function. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, you are getting lots of chats of very cool and nice work. And so you'll be able to scroll back through that. If you have a chance, can you add some notes to our meeting agenda, because we didn't get a robust set of notes from that. So if there are specific things and a link to your slides, that would be super helpful.
Cool. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks. And everybody knows how to get a hold of SebGoa if you need to. So have at it. All right, so up next, because we are in the run-up to the 1.5 release, we're going to go through releases, and I think I saw Jess. Jess, are you on? We'll do 1.4 first, if you are. Maybe no Jess. Maybe I didn't see her. Okay, well, I did see Saad. So Saad, do you want to talk about 1.5, Saad and or Caleb?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Just a quick update for 147 for Jess. I believe she's planning on cutting that on Friday.
Awesome, thanks.
So if you have any changes that need to go into 147, please reach out to her. For 1.50, today was the official release date. We are not going to make it. There is one outstanding issue that is still a blocker. It's the soft lockup issue, CPU being saturated. There's a link in the notes. We believe that we've identified the PR that's causing it, and that PR has been reverted, but we need a couple of extra days to verify that it actually fixes the issue. So that's why we're slipping to Monday, December 12th, which is a new deadline. Everything else is pretty much on track. Testing, manual testing, automated upgrade testing, and all other testing is completed with no blocking issues. Branch status, I'm planning on cutting a beta 3 today. Beta 3, if all goes according to plan, should be identical to what we release on Monday. If we find any more issues between now and Monday, then we'll go ahead and add those in, and it may be different. Cherry picks have been going into 1.5. I've been doing nightly batch cherry picks, unless your PR is very complicated and has merge issues, in which case I'll ping you on your PR to do it yourself. At this point, there should be no more cherry picks to 1.5 for 1.50. If there are, please ping me on Slack and I'll take a look. Docs, all the docs are completed except for one outstanding PR, which is still in review. Devin and Jared are working on it, and they're actually just going ahead and committing grammar fixes and things themselves. Hopefully that gets resolved soon, but since we've got a couple extra days, it's not a blocker. Release notes have been merged to the features repo. There's a link in the notes. Please go take a look at that, especially if you have a feature that's going out with 1.5. If something doesn't look correct, please create a PR to fix it. Aaron is taking a look at those PRs, and when we go do the release on Monday, we're automatically going to pick up that file. So please update it if there's something that's incorrect before Monday. And finally, we're holding burn down meetings every day at 1 p.m. There's a link to the notes. If you want to join the burn down meeting Google group, and you should get an invite. And that is all. Any questions?
1.5, anyone? All right, well, thank you, Saad and Caleb and Dims for all of the work that you've done on this, plus everyone who did triage on the test failures and work on this last blocking issue, because I know that's been a bit of a scramble in the last couple of days. So thank you for everyone who's helped on that. All right, I think I saw Ihor as well. We're up next to the 2017 roadmap with Ihor and Aparna.
Yeah, I'm here.
Hello, Ihor.
Hello everyone. Hello, Sarah. So let me share my screen. Yeah, this is a brief session. This is like the recap of what has been done during the Developer Summit at Seattle. So Aparna and I, we've been holding the Kubernetes 2017 Planning Roadmap session. Actually, there were 2 sessions because of like huge interest of the participants to join them and like to define the roadmap for the product for the next year. So so this is the brief timeline. So how the 2017 release will happen. So we don't have any exact dates, but this is like the approximate dates for 2017. So as seen this year, we are going to release four times, like 1 release per quarter. During the roadmap session, we have been following the next format. So we divided the audience up to some stations. So there were like a few tables where people who've been joining the session, they've been participating and discussing some specific stuff, like with regards to some specific SIGs. I'll show that on the next slide. Also, we have shared a template with Kubernetes Dev where all the people were able to share their thoughts into the structured form into the spreadsheet. So you can find a link to a template in these slides. So the main themes for 2017 were the scalability of the project, the reference architectures, the multi-tenancy, readiness of the cluster lifecycle, and enabling Kubernetes to be run on multi-clouds, including AWS, Azure, premises, OpenStack, and so on. So this.
Or if I can add, those themes are distilled from the 2 planning sessions that we had at the Developer Summit. And so they're kind of an aggregation of the details that Ihor will talk through in the remaining slides. And I think it is worth noting that there were a couple of SIGs that were absent from the planning sessions, and so we still have to work that input in. I think those SIGs did meet separately. So SIG Storage and SIG Federation in particular were not part of this, this planning, and so we will aggregate those inputs separately.
Yeah. So in this slide, you may notice how these stages, how the SIGs were subdivided. So we aggregated the specific SIGs into like some areas, and they have been discussing all this stuff. So in these slides, you may find them in the meeting notes. I have aggregated all the, we have aggregated all the notes that have been collected during the meetings. So feel free to suggest if you have anything there. So Aparna, do you have any other questions? Suggestions, I mean.
We can go through each of the slides in a little bit more depth. So let's actually just start with this. I think this was maybe one of the highest priorities of the group overall for 2017, is that we have to fix the known gaps in the project, particularly scaling the project. There was a whole session that Brian Grant and others led about scaling both the code base and the community. And I think that there's a full document on on some of the ideas and what we're going to do there in terms of splitting the repo and making it easier for contributors to contribute and also to have a path in the community. There was also a discussion on improvement of the documentation. This is a big outstanding item, and so that's something that we plan to tackle heavily in 2017. And it has been, to be fair, it has been improving over the last couple of releases. And then the third piece is the need for reference architectures, particularly targeting specific types of workloads or specific types of environments. So these were the kind of table stakes pieces. I think we listed this as the first theme. Ihor, we can kind of go back through each of the slides in order if we have time. Yeah. So this was
time. You've got about 8 more minutes.
Oh, okay. Then maybe we won't go through it in a lot of detail. Yeah, I think the applications and workloads, there were different SIGs that kind of got together to discuss overall our roadmap for applications and workflows. And I think what came out of that is that we want to have some well-documented example patterns and recommended workflows. And that's kind of a major goal for 2017. And I think that is, in combination with the work that has been happening with the Helm package manager and the charts. There was also a discussion around whether we need to be more opinionated or to provide more opinionation on the CI/CD part of the developer workflow. And in general, the discussion resulted in, no, we don't need to add features into Kubernetes for this. And this is something that's a non-goal for the project. It's probably something that should emerge through the incubator and other parts, but it's not something that we would work on. And this is the only thing I would say for this SIG, or this set of SIGs. You can go to the next slide. Yes, so scalability and federation. Federation was missing here. We will incorporate that. I think they have a pretty robust roadmap already, which includes taking their current features to GA and improving usability. But on scalability, the discussion was that we need a more careful definition of scalability, something that is not just at the cluster level, but incorporates some production-like applications. And so we sort of had a definition of scalability, which is very specific. It's based on API latency, and there's just 2 kind of cluster-level SLOs. But we found that was insufficient when we had a customer or a user like, some of our larger users. And so we want to create in 2017 more natural benchmarks and also more extensive tests that test a more production-like environment. And also we want to move to at least an HA config for scalability testing. And also scalability will not just be on a per cluster basis, but we will need to test a federation of clusters to demonstrate the actual scale that's possible. That was the high level on this. Right, so this was a big group, the Node, Auth, and Network teams. They kind of, I think we have 2 slides on this. And I'm not sure that this is complete, but some of the themes that came out for 2017 were to ensure network policy, hierarchical network policy, and move towards quality of service in the context of hybrid applications. On the networking side, I think this is minimal, but ensuring internal L7 load balancing. There was a lot of discussion as far as what needs to happen on the node. You can read some of that. Obviously, the P0 here being the runtime strategy, that we're going to have an alpha of CRI in this release in 1.5, and so that needs to extend and evolve and eventually go GA in 2017. Some of the other things here are with regard to GPU support and so forth. So that's also a plan for 2017. The next slide. Yeah, so the next slide has more on auth. There was a lot of discussion on auth, some P0s, some gaps that we know we have with regard to management of secrets and encryption. That's something that we have to work on. And then many other things to essentially enable multi-tenancy. I think that was the main discussion here. So moving R back to beta, improving IAM for pods, improving the login experience, enhancing network policy, app-to-app authentication. This was all in service of things like multi-tenancy and also in service of the work that we're doing in the service catalog SIG. Right, and so the AWS, OpenStack, vSphere, Bare Metal, this was a combination of SIGs that have been talking about what do we need to do in 2017 to enable other types of infrastructure or other infrastructure and make sure that we have a robust offering for all types of clouds, private, public, bare metal, etc. And so this was really, can we create reference architectures? I think there's also assumed in here the work that we're doing on install and making sure that we keep adding, ease of install for new cloud providers. I think it says something like 1 end per quarter. And then integrating into multiple clouds as well for things like IAM. And I think the other thing that happened with this discussion is that there was a little bit of a prioritization. And so the group is proposing that we prioritize AWS, followed by Azure, followed by OpenStack, and then vSphere. And there's some thinking that we may or may not be able to get to bare metal. I think that'll be best effort. But this is a proposed priority for 2017. So yeah, cluster lifecycle, SIG, and cluster operations, that whole group really had a lot of work that they did in 2016, and so they want to move that to production. They want to incorporate upgrades with user-defined downtime and maintenance windows, and also the ability to roll back, to do that all in an easy way through potentially the KubeADM tool. And also to be able to address that in an HA cluster. So those are the two P0s. There's some rationalization that needs to happen in terms of cluster lifecycle tools. So I think the proposal here was to split KubeADM into phases, and that would help with making it reusable for other tools and other provisioning tools as well. And this is a P2, but I think very important is conformance and interoperability testing. So that's also something that would be on the roadmap for 2017. And lastly, docs on lifecycle and on how to do upgrades and so forth. I think this was one of the very important discussions. Autoscaling instrumentation, this was actually relatively straightforward. We need to include custom metrics. We've been working on this for a while. We want to take that out in 2017. Ensure, improve monitoring, improve the working of cluster autoscaler and HPA to apply also to federated clusters. This isn't something that we've done yet. And on monitoring, simplify the deployment of third-party monitoring solutions. So there are a number of good deployment monitoring solutions that have come up in the ecosystem, and we want to make them easy to use. There's also, I think, completion of the metrics API. And this might be maybe a P1 or P2 is to introduce InfraStore.
Yeah, there's actually all the groups of SIGs that have been present during the roadmap meeting. So if you have any suggestions regarding this stuff and you'd like to push from your SIG some sorts regarding the roadmap for 2017, feel free to do it here in these slides, in the template, and so on.
And Ihor, you'll put the slide link into the notes, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome, thank you. So we have a couple of comments or questions that came through while this was happening. SIG Scale, Bob said most of the Kate Scale meeting today was on the scalability definition, and it's the main work effort in upcoming weeks. And then Justin Garrison asked about getting what is needed to get better bare metal support in 2017. Are we just limited on people resources and prioritization, or is there something else?
Yeah, so I think that this will need to be, these questions will be best taken up by the groups that met to prepare that roadmap. I have some sense of why these priorities and so forth, but I think it's best addressed with the groups. So each of those slides actually has an owner, and so we can connect. We can make the connection. So I think for the different types of cloud providers, it was Aronchik who's the owner. So I think why don't we connect him on that?
And we also have later in our agenda today the proposal for SIG OnPrem, which is functionally SIG bare metal ++. So Tomas will be talking a bit about that shortly after we go through the stabilization discussions. So if we don't have other questions, we'll have the slides in the link and people can comment and discuss, of course, on email going forward. Are there any other questions? Nope. Awesome. All right. Well, then we will go on to the SIG discussions. So we sent out a bunch of questions. Eric Toon wrote up some questions about self-assessment of each of the special interest groups, trying to determine where they feel their infrastructure is, where they feel their development cycle is, and is 1.6 time for stabilization release. Because we have a lot of features in alpha and a lot of features that we know we have work to be done. I've got reports back from SIG Apps, SIG Network, SIG OpenStack, SIG Off, and SIG Lifecycle. So we're going to go through these pretty quick to talk about what this self-assessment did. So SIG Apps was up first. Eric, since you wrote the questions, do you want to give any more framing before you talk about SIG Apps?
Yeah, I just would say that we've been moving really fast, and we have. Sometimes when I'm in a SIG, I'm confused about how much effort we should spend on fixing the stuff we've got versus looking at all the cool stuff people are building and trying to integrate that. And rather than imposing my opinions about that, I thought we should ask the community how they think things are going. And so that's the genesis of this survey. And I can tell you, I was involved in SIG Apps and I listened to SIG Off, and the answers weren't exactly what I was expecting, but that's good reason to do the survey. So I'll quickly share what we concluded in SIG Apps. We said we have no idea how much test coverage we have, but we felt like it might be 50 to 75% coverage. And of course, one thing we noted was we have code in a couple different Kubernetes repositories. So it'd be great to have automated coverage measurement. It would need to be done in some way that we can somehow cover multiple projects. We spent about a quarter of our time approximately spent responding to user issues, and we felt like we were good user issue responders. And we felt like we spent a good balance, 50-50 on features and stability. And we have about 600, so we called it 1,000 issues related to our SIG. Our SIG is popular. Maciek was kind enough to kind of measure how many flakes we had, and we estimated about 50. So that's where we're at. Thanks.
Did you decide if you wanted to spend your time on stabilization or not stabilization this time?
We decided that we had the right balance. We haven't actually done our Q1 planning yet, so I would say that I will be able to speak to that more once we plan Q1, even though Q1 is already almost upon us.
It is very much upon us, sadly. Delightfully something. All right, well, thanks, Eric. All right, SIG network, Casey and Dan.
Sorry, Eric's planning on moving forward with the same kind of workflow that they've done in previous quarters. There probably will be some new features as well as some focus on stabilization. The plan isn't to move entirely to stabilization. We're totally undecided at this point.
I mean, a lot of this, I don't think we're introducing any new API types next quarter, so that would be sort of not a big feature. I think there will definitely be improvements to existing API types, and you could argue about whether that's features or stabilization. Thanks.
Okay, that's a fair assessment. All right. Anything else for SIG Apps before we jump onto SIG Network? All right, let's do SIG Network then. Casey and Dan.
Sure. I'll start by saying we don't think we need a strict stabilization cycle. The output of our discussions was mostly that we are primarily features based. Most of our meetings are sort of idea foundries, but that we don't think we're currently in a state where there's a lot of things that are unstable. There are a lot of, we think there's a lot of tech debt that we should be addressing in the next cycle. So things like moving forward alpha APIs that have been in alpha for too long and similar sorts of issues. At the same time, we also realized we don't have a clear understanding of what our test coverage is. So a lot of different people thought that we had varying levels of test coverage, and kind of similar to that, there are a lot of things that we probably should be considering in networking that usually we don't talk about in this SIG. So in the next cycle, we're going to put a focus on really defining what all those things are, coming up with clear ideas of what that test coverage is and what needs to be done for each. And then similar to test coverage, kind of another bit of tech debt is the documentation, where a lot of it is highly technical at the moment and not very user-focused. So we're going to be doing a review of that documentation as well in 1.6 and trying to see where our holes are and where we can be improving that user experience. Dan, I'm not sure if you had more to add on to that.
Nope, I didn't. I think that's pretty good. Thanks.
Awesome. Does anybody have questions for SIG Network and all of this? Nope. Well, we all know where to find one another on the mailing lists and chat channels and all of that. So if questions come up, that's an option too. So thanks, Casey and Dan. All right. SIG OpenStack, Steve and Ihor.
Okay. So the main thing with SIG OpenStack going forward is we are pretty resource constrained at the moment. So Angus in particular has been one of the owners for that area of the code for some time. Is stepping away from that a little bit. So I don't think there's still some discussion going on, but it doesn't seem like we need an explicit stabilization phase, but we do have kind of a backlog of items, particularly around volume support and certain keystone auth types, where feature work was done at some point, but there are edge cases that we need to address that are tracked in the open issues. And Igor and I have been doing more active triage of late to try and get a clearer list of that than we had in the past. So the other thing that was discussed on the list recently around E2E testing, getting at least one OpenStack provider reporting that on a regular basis. Ideally, I think as a stretch, we'd like to get 3, but I think in 1.6 timeframe, just 1 would be better than nothing. And the other thing, in terms of documentation, there is not actually a kind of vanilla getting started guide for the OpenStack provider at the moment. And there's also a number of parameters that have been added to the provider in the last 6 to 12 months, which are pretty much undocumented unless you go and read the code. So that's a pretty obvious gap that I've started poking in the SIG docs Slack, kind of where that should fit in the updated documentation structure, and then who can help work on that basically. Igor, do you have anything to add?
No, this is like general statements, so thank you. That's all from our side. Any questions, maybe? Okay. SIG Off is the next one.
Oh, whoops, I'm muted. I'm talking to myself. Oh, hi. SIG Off is up next. Do we have SIG Off and Jordan? No, Jordan. Okay, well then let's go on to SIG Cluster Lifecycle. I had that whole conversation by myself, so apologies for repeating and leaving dead air. But Lucas and George, can you, I don't know if Marco is also on, but can you two speak to what's going on with SIG Cluster Lifecycle?
Yep. In general, it could be considered both a stabilization and a little of new features. Some we want to address upgrades in particular, and provide self-hosting as an alternative for KubeADM. Also, we're gonna try to coordinate the releases of KubeADM to match the 1.6 release to sync up that way, which isn't the case now. Also, a lot of refactoring and yeah, simply moving towards general availability. Yeah, trying to get things narrow beta. And also, we're not gonna try to implement AJ as such. Instead, try to address some blockers that we are currently facing now. So, yeah, stabilization.
Excellent. One of the few groups that has said yes, it's really going to be more stabilization. That's good to hear as well. I know SIG Storage did this last release in 1.5 after the 1.4 work that brought in a bunch of new work. In any case, thank you. Anybody have questions for SIG Cluster Lifecycle? What work they're going to do? I expect we'll have more of these reports next week. We'll get another chunk of SIGs having gone through this and talking about what they've been working on and what they've come to for the 1.6 work. Any other questions? All right. Well, then we will continue to move on, and we're getting through this quicker than I thought, so that's kind of awesome. So Tomas was going to talk about SIG OnPrem. So this is the hardware and other option special interest group. And oh wait, we can actually double back. I'm sorry, I apologize. I will double back and do SIG Off because Eric Cheng has just joined us. So we'll do the same questions around the 1.6 stabilization release questions for SIG Off. And Eric, you're up.
Yeah, I'm desperately pulling up the document where we write all this down, but
I can walk through the questions for you if that helps.
Oh no, I mean on the SIG Off side of things, because we actually covered this and we have this written down in our meeting notes. The highlights, the basic highlights is that David Eads, who contributes a lot, is going to be working to get R back to beta, I think is the biggest thing as part of the stability of that particular system. And the notes, sorry, just to reiterate, the notes were from the thread about stability and all the things that you can address, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah, so we are going to review the owner's files. We do sort of an okay job with the few people that we have for SIG Off in terms of the code that we own, but we'll be reviewing those. We are also going to be trying to figure out a better way to archive a lot of our conversations. Our Slack channel is awesome. Come join our Slack channel, but it's not particularly searchable. So hopefully we can try to figure out how to best use like our Google form channel so we don't get lots of repeated questions. We don't have a whole ton of new features. A lot of the efforts are going to be around getting R back to beta, trying to document a lot of the components that already exist and how, that are auth or security related, and then continuing to sort of try to evaluate where we go from there. So yeah, it's largely testing some federated API server stuff just to sort of bring it back in line. Possibly talking about credential rotation, but nothing particularly new featurey, nothing too major on that front. And yeah, just trying to continue to improve the docs, which we know are pretty sparse for a lot of the auth-related features.
Excellent. So it sounds like it's not a lot of new features. So while not explicitly stabilization, a lot of the same goals of improvement of what is there already.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you very much for jumping in as a pinch hit. That's awesome.
Yeah, no problem.
Oh, and then Brandon Phillips is also saying making the security response plan. Yes, which I also owe you a thing on, Brandon. I do know that. Making the security response plan an actual thing and formalized plan and group and having a way to address security issues that is consistent and transparent and expected. Well, as transparent as security issues can be. Anyway. But as expected and planned as opposed to an ad hoc way that we are closer to doing at this point. Awesome. Thank you all for this. One other thing I wanted to draw attention to was there is a conversation happening on the working group contributor experience and the SIG leads mailing lists, talking about what it means to be a SIG, what the expectations of SIGs are. And Eric, I think you touched on some of these questions and points when you're like, we need a better way to archive Slack, but not. So we have an archiver for Slack, but that's still not very searchable. It's still not very discoverable. And so we're trying to make more formalization around how SIGs communicate with each other and with the broader community in a formalized way. So we will have more on that, but there is a discussion happening on Contributor Experience Working Group as well as the SIG Leads mailing list right now if you wanted to contribute. All right, so now on to the proposed new SIG of SIG OnPrem. So now, Tomas, I apologize for the earlier call out and doubling back to SIG Off, but you're up.
No problem. Hello, everyone. Greetings from Prague, which I'm visiting today. So just to recap a little bit, so there was this proposal from Joseph Jacks from Apprenda to start the SIG bare metal the original name, which kind of evolved into SIG OnPrem, which is probably better name for that. So a couple of companies were interested, including Cores, I think also Canonical, Mirantis from our side, Apprenda as well. Also, lots of our partners were asking for this SIG to be created to kind of improve the bare metal on-premise situation to make the user experience similar to other platforms. I think we defined a draft of the goals and focus for the SIG. It's on the mailing list in the email thread.
And Joseph just dropped it into the chat here as well, and we'll put it in the notes.
All right. Yeah, cool. Yeah, thanks, Joseph. Yeah, I would kind of summarize the goal as, make a bare metal or on-premise first-class citizen in Kubernetes world. So there was very positive feedback, and also there were some concerns emerged. So we were invited to discuss that on SIG Cluster Ops, which seemed to be the most overlapping SIG. So yeah, we joined the meeting there. We discussed it. I think the discussion was very good. There was more understanding why we need that. And Jorge Castro and Marco Ceppi volunteered to represent SIG Cluster Ops on this meeting today and maybe present their position and answer some questions. Also, Joseph is here if there are some questions about the future, etc. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't know how much time we have. If we want to go through some more details. We worked with Joseph on some plan for a couple of next meetings, defining goals, what we should do, where we should engage, etc. But I think it's like after the kickoff, we can do it on the first meeting for this new SIG.
Yeah, I think it would be, are there any questions about this, or are we all in agreement that this is good to go? I'm going to bet that Justin Garrison is going to be on board for this. It's just a guess. But are there any questions for the team? Sounds like no, or you're muted. All right, well then we will get this moving along. And as I mentioned, there is the thread on the SIG Leads mailing list and Contributor Experience Working Group mailing list defining what our requirements are around being a SIG in good standing. So we will be doing a lot more work around what that is and making sure that we have the right number of SIGs and the SIGs are active and engaged in a way that makes transparency and upward communication of what's happening inside the SIGs up to the broader community better. I think one of the suggestions was also a SIG summary mailing list where the SIGs send out summary notes, that kind of thing. So we're trying to make this a better experience, especially as we broaden the number of special interest groups working on this. All right, so the answers to some of the questions are we're working on it as far as when is the next SIG bare metal call or SIG on-prem call, and we'll get that all set up. Oh, and some positive thoughts on SIG summaries. That would be awesome. Okay, well then, does anyone have any other topics they want to bring up? We've got 2 or 3 minutes to spare there. I'll take that as a no, and I'll go through notices, but if anybody else has something else to bring up, please drop it in chat or interrupt me. So we've defined new names for our release teams. There is going to be the minor release team, minor release manager, and the patch release manager and patch release team. So going forward, instead of just calling them release managers in both cases and not being able to distinguish, at this point, the minor release team would be Saad and Caleb and Dims, who have been working so hard on 1.5, and Jess Frizzell has been the patch release manager, a patch release team for the 1.4 patches. So once we cut 1.5 at the end of, or the beginning of next week, then we will define a patch release team for the 1.5 patches going forward. But new words, so we're going to try and be consistent about it going forward. It was starting to be confusing talking about them as we had multiple versions running at the same time. I've talked already about the contributor working group, or contributor experience working group, and the SIG Leads mailing lists about what being a SIG in good standing looks like. So please take a look at that discussion if you haven't seen it. I'll link it in the notices. There is the December 22nd community meeting is going to be our 1.5 retrospective. We're not going to do that on a Friday because that would be the 23rd, and most people are, I hope, heading off to holiday things by then. So we're going to co-opt the Thursday, December 22nd meeting for this. And that also means that we don't have to come up with an agenda beyond figuring out what went well and what went poorly in 1.5. And then, of course, there is no meeting on December 29th. So that's what I've got for notices. Anything else for anyone?
Yeah, I have a quick notice, Sarah.
Awesome.
If anybody cares about how we manage issues and PRs, there is a thread that you should read, at least the summary at the top, about issue and PR recap, something like that. Ihor and I have started changing all the labels. So last night I renamed a bunch of labels to make them more consistent and added a bunch of missing labels for all the SIGs. So all the SIGs should have labels now, so we can route issues and PRs to the appropriate SIGs using labels. Those changes are still underway. We need to change the bots to not use the old priority labels. The numerical priorities are going away, and we'll have separate sets of labels for managing the submit queue and the priorities of issues. If you have any questions about that, just follow up on that thread. Thanks to Phil for posting that.
Awesome. Anyone else? Discussion? Okay, we'll put that into the notes. Thanks, Philip. Anybody else? All right, well then we will see you all next week with more SIG introspection, because we want to make sure that the SIGs are communicating upward with the broader community regularly. So have a great week, and I'll see you on the internet.